What happened at your work which caused multiple people to all quit at once? The boss went off on a tirade on me for something that wasn't my fault and I got him to scream people like you are expendable pieces in this company and I can replace you tomorrow if I wanted to. 80% of the engineers quit the next day. Simply didn't show up, including me. From what I know, the entire project folded because my now ex-boss couldn't find people to replace us because no one wanted to do the kind of work he was looking for at the salary he was paying. That backfired. There was one guy who was going to be fired for coming in late constantly. However, many of the potential replacements his company interviewed wanted a ridiculously high salary. Turns out that one guy lowballed himself on his salary. All of a sudden, coming in 15 minutes late each day became quite the bargain. Cancelled all raises and bonuses for everyone except the CEO, his wife, financial and HR, and his son. Utterly useless IT. In a year where we have record profits and brought in almost double the clients on top of announcing they aren't looking to hire more people when we were already overwhelmed. Good part about it was when the majority of us quit they lost almost every single client shortly afterwards to their competitors and the company is now defunct. This feels really good to read. We stopped providing free coffee and were so cheap that we sold our coffee maker. This was in Seattle. So a couple of people bought their own coffee makers to put in their cubes. That tripped the breakers several times so it was very disruptive since our computers would shut down. Management then said no coffee allowed in the office at all. We lost 4 very good engineers. Management then said no coffee allowed in the office at all. Who could possibly think this kind of policy would fly? That's unreal. Sounds like the grounds for a dang riot. Tattoo shop owner, who lived in another state, hired some butthole to come revamp the shop. I had been managing for 3 years at this point and he just expected me to teach him how to do my job so he could replace me. That guy had no clue how to run a shop. Plus the owner had been embezzling money for her coke habit and had blamed the longest standing artist at the shop for lost revenue. Accused him of stealing. I did the books. No one was stealing. She was nuts. Anyway, all the artists and I mutinied and left at the same time. Fricked them over good. With that idiot at the helm the shop didn't last a year after we all left. Many years ago in high school I worked at a movie theater. The place was pretty poorly run from the moment I started there. We never got paid on time and management was basically a bunch of lazy jackasses who sat in the office talking all day and never actually did any managing. It would have been hard for things to have gotten any worse but after a couple of months they brought in new management who seemed to want to make it their personal mission to run the theater as poorly as possible. They first decided to implement a new policy requiring all projectionists to wear ties. Despite the fact that projectionists are never seen by the public, not to mention that tiny little detail that the projectionists worked around giant, rapidly spinning objects that a tie could get caught in. Management refused to reconsider the policy and every single projectionist quit as a result. They then decided that the door people, of which I was one, who were always scheduled 7 days a week, would now only be scheduled on the weekends, and refused to reassign any of us to concessions on the weekdays so we wouldn't lose hours. As a result, almost every single door person quit, including me. After that they started imposing impossible cleanliness standards on concessions. Things like requiring them to scrape popcorn kernels out of the cracks in the trim behind the popcorn machines. Concessions was there until 5 AM every night trying to meet their standards. Most of the concession people quit as a result. By my count the theater went from a staff of about 50 to a staff of about 12 in 3 weeks. I swung by about a month after I quit and found out that entire management staff had been fired and replaced yet again by an entirely new one. Ones who actually seemed to be running the theater properly. My best guess is that the previous management had been told to whip the theater into shape and they were idiots who had no idea how to effectively do that. Or they were there simply to cut staff, to be the bad guys. Now the new managers come in, hire a bunch of people, but fewer than 30, and look like winners to the 12 people that stayed. Maybe. Sometimes I get suspicious. I used to work at a grocery store. We had a manager who was hired to run the store but not be the franchisee, and when his numbers were satisfactory enough, they would let him franchise it. So far toward a year later and this guy was doing everything he could, making the store run and look wonderful and all the staff liked one another. Out of nowhere he is told they are putting in a franchisee bid and tell him that if he wants it, he can have it. He bids, but so does one of the district manager's sons. He gets it. Original manager is of course P but accepts to stay as the grocery manager if he keeps pay rate. Fast forward and the new franchisee gets fired for not following regulations. They do the franchisee bid a second time and tell original manager the same thing. He can have it if he wants it. They give the store to another person a second time. I felt bad for the guy because all of his hard work and how well he treated me. Store starts going downhill causing a lot of change and a lot of pee off people. I was the first one to walk out as all of ours were cut. The new franchisee never spoke to anyone but would be if we didn't do things our way. I find out 14 more people quit within a month. We just had a company-wide, except the directors of course, pay cut of 20% and a 4-day work week instead of 5. Everyone including myself are currently looking for work and they will lose their workforce so quickly. When I was 16, I worked in the concession stand at a minor league baseball stadium. Minimum wage at the time was $5.15 HR. This job paid $8 and it was always in the evenings so it was perfect work for a high school student. The only bad thing was our management was terrible. The main manager would throw toddler tantrums about once a shift over stupid bulls, like not ordering enough of a specific beer she did the ordering, or running out of pre-cut lemons for tea. One night the stadium was running a promotion and it was incredibly busy, easily 2-3x the normal volume of customers. We were all working our asses off handling multiple roles each with absolutely no downtime. Although we all cleaned as we worked, nobody had a chance to do thorough cleaning for the whole shift because of the never-ending horde of hungry baseball fans. The manager showed up 3-4 hours late per usual and throws the biggest freaking tantrum ever over the unswept floor. Finally, she announces, "Listen up you lazy fricks. Minimal work gets minimal pay. Everybody is being paid minimum wage tonight because you slobs won't clean up anything." Both of our bartenders and the bar back quit on the spot, which caused a chain reaction. We all took off our aprons and hats to leave. She blocked the exit and was red in the face from screaming. So one of the cooks climbed out of one of the big serving windows where we served customers. So I did the same and most of the staff followed. Bear in mind that this all happened in front of like 200 plus customers. Of course, my final paycheck got lost so I had to file a wage theft complaint with the Texas Workforce Commission. Promised a bonus at the end of the year. Told everyone they will not be giving out bonuses due to the low company performance. Company had a successful year. Boss was in the middle of building a multi-million-dollar home. Brother-in-law manager just bought a nice home that year. I quit on the spot. Many others quit soon after. Company changed from 5 8-hour shifts to a 12-hour shift rotation. I worked at a factory after they changed from a 8-hour rotation to a 12-hour rotation. For most people, the extra time off in the schedule was better than working fewer hours at a time. For some, though, their jobs went from 9-5 MF to the 12-hour rotation that included nights. They all quit. Oh fricking boy, I worked at Buffalo Wild Wings for a few years as a line cook. 2 different stores, same fricking pay. It was the type of work where you ask for a raise and they scoff and say yeah, me too. Anyways, I had been pretty dead set on quitting sooner or later. Our kitchen was very small. Most people ended up closing 4-5 days a week with doubles on the weekends, while still attending school full time as it was a college town. On Super Bowl freaking Sunday, a useless co-worker who ducked out in the bathroom most the shift finally stopped showing, and in response the managerial staff delegated closing to my pal Jay. Dude was a freaking delight to be around. Hands down the best co-worker ever. Jay had told them that due to being a full-time student, he no longer wanted to be first in last out, 4 PM to 12 AM, 1 AM on the weekends. They basically told him to go frick himself, and that they don't have any more shifts for him. Immediately, me and one other cook walked to the office and quit on the spot. Buffalo Wild Wings lost 4 cooks on Super Bowl Sunday, leaving them with 7 full-time students on the schedule. It was a managerial crap show. I was hired by the new owners to replace the existing manager. I was under the impression that he was moving on to another job somewhere. So after about 4 days I ask him where he's headed and if he's excited. He just looks blankly at me and says, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm just training you as the assistant manager." Right. The look I gave him must have been a great tip-off because he got up and walked into one of the new owner's offices. After about 30 seconds they were screaming at each other, then he just storms out of the office, grabs his stuff, give me the finger, and leaves. Over the next few days I'm trying to calm things with the employees. They're not faulting me, but now have a very bad taste in their mouths about the new ownership. Over about a 7-10 day time period my team shrank from 15 people down to 3. I hobbled along with that the best I could while we tried to hire new people, but the new owners were offering so little we had trouble finding people. After 3 months or so of that I started to get fed up and overwhelmed, and when the owners started to get on me about missed deadlines I had it. We were still only at 5 people, 2 of which were brand new and still training. They didn't allow me to refuse work or push deadlines out. They expected the same output as a 15-person team. So after my 3rd day in a row of being berated for missing a deadline that was impossible to make, I quit. They laid off half the company with no warning. This included a gentleman who was less than a year from retirement and had been there for 35+ years. The company was shocked when half the remaining people abandoned ship shortly thereafter. Worked at a Wendy's and one of the regional managers started running a store because they wouldn't find new managers to replace the old ones. Well anyways, this guy practically ran the place into the ground. Before he started running the store most everyone liked working there as it was a good environment. A few months after, a couple of people quit because of him. And one day I roll in at 9 to help open the store and he comes out to my car as soon as I park. I was 15 minutes early and usually just sat in my car until 9 and tells me, "Hey, I need to start early because the 3 openers just quit on me." We managed to get the store open and had a number of people from other stores help run the place until the people from the next shift came in. A couple days later I hear the full story of what happened from a coworker. The regional manager is supposed to be at the store at 7 or so, and the openers 30 minutes later. He didn't actually show up until 8:30, so when the openers, already peeved being at work really early and not being on the clock, saw the regional manager roll in and knew it was gonna be an awful shift, all decided that they were done with him and just quit right there. So at least 6 people quit because of him by the time I left the place. Probably more left after me. I did landscape construction. The cheap butt owner kept taking bigger and bigger projects while never hiring more help. We were all overwhelmed, stressed, and anxious as heck. One of our foremen quit and I followed suit a few days later. 2 more guys quit the next day. He was down to 3 guys for the obscene amount of work he wanted to do. Of course everything gets way behind schedule, but he's convinced it's not his fault at all. He went out of business less than a year later. I was working for a very large IT company. Before the tech bubble burst we had a meeting with our new director and the VP. They were tired of people complaining about things that should be changed at the job and how they managed people. So they sat around 200 of us down in our auditorium, and the director said she didn't want to hear any more complaints on how she was running things, and if we didn't like them there was the door and that there was no way we'd leave such a great job. Well, there was a mass exodus and probably close to 50 people left within 2 months. She and the VP were auged and given 0 reports. They were gone after a round of layoffs happened shortly after. I thought you were gonna say that it happened on the spot. Like she said in a rhetorical way, if you don't like it then there's the door. And then to her shock the entire auditorium stands up and files out. I'm gonna pretend that's what happened because it's funnier. A well-known colleague committed suicide and we were told by management via a brief side note in an email about stats at the end of the day. It caused a lot of upset in the office and quite a few people didn't return after this. Owners retired. They were literally the greatest people, both very sweet, but kept the place running like a well-oiled machine. They took pretty good care of us and their restaurant. When they left, they gave the restaurant over to their nephew, who at the time was a busboy waiter. Kind of standoffish, didn't really interact with us too much, a bit lazy at times, but for the most part did his crap and went home. He seemed okay, until he got the power of being the owner. He fired 4 people, including 2 of the 4 cooks, and 2 of the 3 dishwashers, literally that same day, on a Friday night just before the dinner rush, all because he didn't like their attitude. He refused to allow people to take vacation that they'd already requested and gotten confirmed by the original owners, would change the schedule randomly without telling anyone and then scream at people when they missed a shift or came in late because of it. He'd refuse to replenish the kitchen until we were literally already out of things, then take forever to put in the orders. He showed up randomly and would drink at a bar, for free of course because he was the owner, and then bring in all his buddies to drink with him. Together they'd get way out of hand and grab at women and try to start fights. Within the first month of him being the owner, over half the staff had quit, usually walking out literally in the middle of their shifts, after being screamed at. They'd basically throw down their aprons and tell everyone else that they were so sorry but they couldn't do it anymore. After the last cook, this big dude who usually kept the kitchen laughing and running at a decent pace, started crying in the middle of his shift and dropped everything he was doing after the boss came and yelled at him for being too slow and making slop. Then walked out. The rest of us just bailed along with him. 4 months later the place was closed. His aunt and uncle were absolutely furious and devastated that he'd run the business they'd built up for over 30 years into the ground. They called everyone into a major company meeting and informed us we were all, except for sales and managers, being offshored to India and the Philippines. They had a plan for us training our replacements that, strangely, didn't account for pre-scheduled turnover. People started finding jobs literally the next week and the hemorrhaging never stopped. Sounds like what Disney did with their IT staff. They reviewed the cameras back 3 months to catch people coming in less than 3 minutes late and have them all write-ups. Like 20 people walked out across the entire unit. I feel like a 3-hour delay is an emergency and excusable. A 15-minute delay is a tardy effort to get to the office. And a 3-minute delay is a excusable traffic jam. New management. In a month, 4 kitchen staff quit, leaving me to be the only original kitchen staff hire from the previous manager. She completely changed the vibe of the workplace. No one was happy. No one felt like talking or listening to music or being friendly. It was robotic. Worked at a data company. The guys in the sales department fricked around all day. They'd literally be in the parking lot drinking beer and racing RC cars. When it came to handling accounts clients, they frequently gave away free accounts in order to retain customers and make their own sales numbers look good, and somehow they got away with it. Meanwhile, there were dozens of programmers and database nerds working tirelessly behind the scenes to integrate a bunch of complicated data and make it easy to access via the website. Yearly holiday announcements come around, and upper management decides to send the entire sales team to Hawaii for an all-expense-paid vacation. When the furious developers asked why they were just taking the sales team, the confused CEO literally said, "Well, I guess we could ask the sales team to pick one person from each department who helped them the most this year, and take them too." The programmers, engineers, database people were livid, and walked out in droves. Gee, I wonder why the company tanked. That's the one way to totally screw your company. Pee off the people who keep it running. Several years ago I worked in a mental health center. We worked primarily with kids. It was time for the center to renew their certification. Instead of keeping up with everything that needed to be done over the course of 5 years, the proper procedures were ignored. In this couple months before recertification, administration made us sit through a ridiculous amount of training on things that would have been covered in training such as HIPAA laws and identifying child abuse. Then came our paperwork. Our center encouraged us to do things that aren't exactly covered by Medicaid or approved through certification. For example, taking kids to the park isn't allowed. But guess where they instructed us to take these kids so they didn't disturb the therapist working? I had to go back and edit 5 months worth of documents to get rid of the evidence. The kicker was that bathrooms were supposed to have a log of when it was cleaned. An administrator perfectly forged the signatures of multiple employees. I don't think they would have went through that trouble just for a bathroom log. What else were they forging our signatures on? The potential risk of being charged with Medicaid fraud was too high for me. I quit, as did many others. Wasn't my office but one in my building. The old CEO retired. He was extremely well loved and very fair. His replacement was a lady not known for her social skills. She hired her sister as the new VP and passed over everyone who was in line for promotions. Literally everyone but the sister and the secretary quit the next week together to go work for a competitor. The former CEO had to come back to try and fix everything. He ended up having to help the new CEO hire basically a new company. I don't think it's going well. I feel bad for that old CEO. School district I sometimes sub in had a big round of hiring. A bunch of building substitutes applied for the jobs, and only about half of them got interviews. Of the subs that got interviews, myself included, the only one who made it past the screening interview was a relative of a current employee. The rest of us subs weren't the right fit. The real reason is that there's a substitute shortage and they don't want to lose any of us. Not a single sub, who isn't a relative, was hired for one of over a dozen teaching jobs. Many of the building subs are coming back next year. There's a sub shortage due to really low pay. My district requires subs to have a 4-year degree. Then they pay $140 a day. So even if a sub was able to get a job every day, they could only make 180 days $140, $25,200, and with no health insurance and no benefits. Frick that. Working at a local restaurant that had recently changed owners, multiple issues came up. Difficulty getting off for important things, hiring people to work in kitchen who were bad at their job but cheaper ingredients, etc. As well as owner just kinda sat around and drank while they're not doing much. Things were tense and after a few months we were really just hanging in there cause we liked each other. Previous owners were a sweet old couple that set a great vibe. I know some others and I were already looking for a job. Anyways, there was a young mother who waited tables there and really needed the job. Couldn't afford to be between jobs. One night she got a call that her grandmother had a severe stroke, was unresponsive, and was not expected to make it through the night. She asked to get off and start her 3-hour drive to Dallas. Manager says of course, but the owner says no. Manager and owner got into a verbal fight in the back. The waitress ended up pleading her case, crying. Manager said that if the owner wouldn't let her go, he was done. Owner ended up firing them both on the spot. Within the next 15 minutes everyone who hadn't been recent hire ended up walking out of the building. Dang, that's cold. Like Mr. Scrooge level cold. Completely deserved the walkout. PM sent. Anytime I've seen a mass exodus, it was because of poor management. I've never seen it organized. Just a bunch of employees independently deciding to quit in the same month because the management was so bad. Yet, that's the case on 9 times out of 10. People don't leave jobs, they leave crappy bosses. I'm the manager of a retail store and I had found out a cashier was stealing product by scamming reward card benefits. I came up with a detailed incident report to present to this employee and I was under the assumption it was just her. After I confronted her in a reasonable manner, she freaked out and got really angry and quit on the spot. She was using fake accounts instead of using a customer's reward card to get herself points and redeem them for product gift cards. So the customers weren't getting the points they are owed, which is a headache for me if they notice and complain. The next day every other cashier called me and quit, and after thinking WTF just happened, I found out they were all in on it and were using this lady's fake card on their shifts too. So I'm down 4 cashiers and I have 1 left. This same day my last remaining cashier disappeared for 20 minutes. Turns out she was in the bathroom with another employee doing the nasty. She quits because her dad is a cop and doesn't want to find out she got fired for this, and she also asked me if she should go to urgent care because she didn't take her tampon out before they did it and she couldn't find it. The guy also quit because he didn't care and was moving anyway. I was down to literally managers only. So the first part is the mass exodus and the last part was just for can you believe this crap? This was a wild ride. Truth is stranger than fiction, particularly in retail. And after working in retail, I 100% know this happened. Jesus, I hope you've moved on to greener pastures. The owner died and his idiot son took over and decided that the company didn't make him enough money and started to implement cost-cutting measures like turning off the AC in the building. Worked in construction as part of our HSE team. The chief engineer was P that the job was taking slower because of the HSE, especially safety procedures. We had a couple lost time incidents at this point, and just a week before a guy almost died. But he was still pretty P about the delays, so he got everyone in a room to say, "You're not here to do your jobs. You're here to do what I tell you to do." 20 people asked to quit on the spot. Freaking C. Turned out our owner was keeping the social security money taken from our paychecks. And yes, he was caught. You can pull that scam for about 4-5 years. Really insane the lack of communication between the IRS and SS. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.